Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.
Hello, Avaya family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Beverly Ann, is with us today to talk about how it's not just in the head. Beverly is an award-winning, accredited, and outstanding recovery practitioner for chronic fatigue and pain, specializing in adults overcoming adverse childhood experiences. Enabling adult survivors of child abuse and trauma to have a voice is her passion and her life purpose. Welcome to Avaya, Beverly.
Hello, Andy, and lovely to speak with you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'd love it if you just get us started with a little background on you. How is it that you got into what you do today?
I will say I actually have lived experience myself of adverse childhood experiences. So I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse. I was in and out of the social care. So I was in children's homes over here in the UK as a young child, fostered, and then at 16 I lived in a hostel. So it's always been part of my life. But at the age of 16, when it was Christmas time and we were in the hostel, I was sitting around the Christmas table with about 5 other vulnerable young people. And I realised that we had adults around us, but nobody had actually asked our story. And I knew that one day I would use my voice to raise awareness by having a voice on behalf of others, a voice for myself, but also awareness for prevention for cruelty towards children. But as I got older, I also realised the connection with physical and mental well-being as well. So it's become my passion. And although I did the practical things at first and went into sales as a young person, in the background, I was always enabling others and signposting them for recovery, etc. So it's something that's always been natural in me, especially growth and personal development. So yes, I followed the path in the end that I'd been shadow working in, shall I say.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for following that path and for sharing a little bit about your story. I love that. And let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned, traumas, and you also mentioned the physical impacts of those traumas. Can you share your thoughts when you talk about both PTSD as well as CPTSD, complex PTSD?
Yes.
How do both of those tend to have a physical impact on our bodies?
Thank you for that question, because I'm very passionate about opening this conversation, because most people, when they talk about PTSD or complex PTSD, tend to think of it as mental health. And yes, there is a neurological aspect about it, but our bodies are wonderful things, and our body is actually built for survival. So it's a bit like a chicken and egg scenario. When we're in danger, it's our vagus nerve that's deep in the base of our stomach that alerts us and sends the signal to the brain, as we know. So it's a physical reaction that then triggers a neurological messaging throughout our body. And we get prepared, ready to run, fight back, or freeze, which again in itself is a physical reaction. And I think also that most of my clients or other people that I speak to, when we start to talk about the physical aspects, it's more reassuring and familiar for people to be in touch with and start to recognise what's going on. Because often when people think it's in their head, or when I say in their head, a mental illness, there's still a lot of stigma about it, and people are quite resistant to go in there. And as we know, when our body's triggered, into a reaction with post-traumatic stress disorder, our emotional side becomes shut off anyway, so that we don't feel necessarily. Hence, I find that if we tap into our physical awareness at first of what's happening in our body and recognize that and acknowledge that, then we can learn tools to then start looking at how we can change the messages that are happening in our body. And even thank our body for trying to keep us safe.
Right. Yes, I know that is one thing that comes up often in conversations around when we're talking about the body and its reactions to trauma, and remembering to be compassionate with ourselves and our bodies, because they are these amazing, right, organisms that are doing exactly what they needed to do in order to keep us safe. And yeah, I love that you brought that up. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I look back as well. Yes, I'm a professional, and yes, I've studied now. But now I can see as well, when I was younger, with my own lived experience, how I was unable to see the physical aspect because it became my norm. And when my body was trying to talk to me, I was unable to hear it. And sometimes I didn't actually know how to respond physically, nurturing myself, because I'd not actually learned that, which is part of the impact of some, especially CPTSD. If you've not been nurtured as a child, or you've learned these survival skills and it becomes so instinctive to live singly, and in that way live without the nurture of an everyday parent, because maybe you're parenting or you're living in fear. But being able to look at the physical aspect really helps learning about self-care, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so for people watching right now who have had either, PTSD or struggles with CPTSD, and they have physical symptoms as a result, how can they change those symptoms?
The first thing is being able to acknowledge what's going on. So in itself, being able to write down a timeline of what's physically happening, even when we look at biomedical practices, what's happening that's making you personally ill, for instance? Are you getting lots of ulcers? Are you suffering from anxiety? Do you feel that your heart rate is beating fast? Are there times that you have challenges with your stomach? So we're really looking at the physical symptoms that are coming, but we often get so used to them happening that we don't actually acknowledge them. So I always say, go away and write down and keep a diary and just check in with yourself physically what's happening. Mm-hmm. And that way it's less scary, because we're not checking in with emotions at the moment. We're doing the everyday, how do I feel right now physically? When we're able to do that, then we're able to think, okay, so for instance, if you're being triggered and you're living in a high state of anxiety, that's our body once again thinking, oh, I need to live in high alert. I think I'm in danger. So when we feel our breath shortening and just breathing from the top of our chest, when we feel our heart beating rapidly, that's when we can ask ourselves the question, am I really in danger? Mm-hmm. Or what do I need right now to relax me? And when I'm thinking like that, then the next physical thing I can do is slow my breathing down. So by 3 deep breaths, sounds so easy, but that takes a learning to do, especially when you need to be able to do it, is a physical reaction to start changing the messaging that's going on in the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, the power of breathing, right?
And again, I didn't understand that. So I remember, and I'll bring it back to me as an example, because then it shows that, I haven't just learned these things from a studying perspective. Having lived experience really helps you to be empathetic and understand that not every way, there isn't one way that works for everybody. It's finding what works for each individual person. But I remember when somebody said about deep breathing 3 times, I was like, that's hard work. my lungs were not used to it. And I actually had to learn how to breathe correctly and to get my lungs to work correctly in their entire function.
Yeah.
Now it's something that has become natural to me, and that's something I work with my clients quite regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And kind of taking a step back for a second, when you mentioned, right, the pain, let's say someone has experienced some kind of physical symptom as it relates to their trauma. And then if they're not tuning into it, then it becomes their normal, like you mentioned. And I think that's an important point to make, because absolutely, right, if you suffered some trauma when you were a child and you've kind of always, quote unquote, suffered from, I don't know, leg pain or back pain or something, or IBS or something like that, right? You might think that that's just your normal, and that's right. It's always been like that, right? But I think that was important that you talk about that, just for people who haven't really drawn that distinction. Well, wait a second, is that like normal? Is that actually normal? Could this not be this way? So yeah.
And, when we think about IBS, when we think about migraines, they're two symptoms that a lot of people actually experience at different times. We can talk facts and figures, but let's just check in with ourselves. Most of us have had a headache at different times. Yes, some headaches because we're not actually drinking enough. That's one thing. But have we ever experienced a time where we've got a headache and then we have a look at what's happening, and are we stressed about something that we're about to do? Is there something connected? Are you going to a family function and there's historic there, that every time you go, you don't feel well, but you just push through it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's once you start making the connection, it's like, okay, so it's not that you're going to stop seeing your family necessarily, but then you can prepare, ask yourself, what is it that I need? Or just start writing it down and giving yourself extra care. This sounds so simple, but it takes a learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm curious too, in all of your work over the years, do you see different symptoms come about for people who have experienced like a single event PTSD versus complex PTSD, like having, dealt with dysfunctional parents or alcoholics or whatever? Like, do you see it manifest in different ways based on the kind of PTSD?
Between PTSD and CPTSD, yes, complex PTSD is more layered. So if you think of an onion, you've got lots more layers. But that's not to take away from people that have, an experience, a huge experience, because I'm a big believer that once they have that huge experience and they have trauma from it, that actually there's all other little traumas that come up in the past, from the little past. And when I say that, one of the things I also like to reassure all my clients is, just because you've had trauma in childhood does not mean that you've come from an unloving family. And there's a big misnomer there, because you can come from a very loving family. You could have gone to the same school as your other siblings, but for you as a young child, if you're walking into an environment and maybe, like school, that you've fallen out with people, or you're being bullied by another child or a teacher, that experience that you're walking into is challenging for that age. So it's not that you haven't come from a young person, a happy family. It's what you've experienced yourself. And then later on, if you have a one-time experience that actually causes PTSD, yes, it's related to that, but it's what else is it triggering within the body? Mm-hmm. And as we said right from the beginning, our body's built to keep us safe. So we have to have all these words for communication, and I really understand that. The first thing is, when we say disorder, I actually don't think it's a disorder. I think it's actually our body's working to its best to keep us safe. And also, for me, there's no dysregulation between PTSD or CPTSD, because really, when we come to it, it's a bit like bereavement. So with bereavement, we experience different emotions at different times, but there is no set way. We don't say, oh, this happens and then that's going to happen. We all experience it differently.
Right. Yeah.
Have I explained that clearly, or have I confused you more?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. Yeah. And I like it. That you likened it to the bereavement. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Absolutely. And I'm curious too, like, how do you work when you're with clients, helping them recover? Is there anything specific you do in your work with them that you could share?
Yes, certainly. So the first thing we always do is look at the physical first, as we said. But that's also looking at the physical self-care. So and I bring it back to simple every single day, because if we try and do too much too quickly, we become overwhelmed. And often my clients are overwhelmed when they've already started working with me. So it may be that they've been functioning extremely well, and you'll find that it's amazing how highly functioning people can actually be, even though they're highly traumatized. And that's because their resilience is exceptional. So what we're trying to do is retrain, and I always try and share the science and the physiological what's happening with regards to the physical and the neurological mental. Once I find my clients have some self-care tools and then they've started to actually implement them and understand their body, they will then naturally start to be able to look at the emotional, the side that they don't want to look at. But naturally, because they're starting to be able to understand and regulate themselves, that is the next step. So that's always at the right pace for my clients.
Gotcha. Awesome.
So I can't say in session 4 or 5, this is what we're going to do. Yes, we have what I call the yellow brick road. However, that yellow brick road is also personal to each client. And if I'm doing group workshops, that's always amazing, because we have this way of also thinking we're not normal, that we're the only ones going through something. And when we're unable to verbalize it, it can be really isolating. So to be able to hear somebody else speaking about, something they've experienced in recovery within a workshop can often be the biggest tool and gift to some of my clients that are taking part.
Yes, it's amazing how that is, right? We can hear someone's story that might not even be the same as ours, but something that they say just hits home with us. And yeah, having that experience of not feeling like you're alone. I love it.
Yeah. And that's another part that, we're human beings, that support is something that is part of our community. We are community people. We're mammals.
Yep.
And so it's something intrinsically natural, and it's a really important part, because with trauma, one of the coping mechanisms is withdrawal and isolation.
Right.
So I always say it's trying to find the balance.
Yes, absolutely. And as far as anxiety goes, since that comes up a lot in the topic of PTSD as a whole, what would you say is the most effective way of healing and overcoming anxiety as it relates to trauma?
Well, that's where, for me, the tools that we use, first of all, tapping into our body. So it may be, you can be anywhere and become anxious. You can be on your own, or you can be within a group of people. But it's being able to ask yourself, okay, this is how I feel. What do I need right now? So the deep breath is one. Do you feel safe in the environment that you're actually in? Are you able to go outside and have some fresh air? By concentrating on what it is you need, that is also telling your body and slowing your body down neurologically. And as we're aware, with the adrenaline, we want to shut the adrenaline off and release the cortisol. So by concentrating on what we need and what we can do for ourselves, and by moving us if we need to walk outside, is a great way of reassuring ourselves that, yeah, I'm okay. This is where I am right now. If you're unable to leave somewhere because we don't always know. It's okay, let's take a deep breath and just have a look around. Can I touch something? Can I put my feet on the floor? Can I smell? What can I smell? Again, these are all natural, instinctive reactions that sound so simple, but when we're able to learn to do it at the time that we're anxious, they're really, really great tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that exactly. They definitely sound simple, but absolutely, just to be able to ground yourself in the moment and just pay attention to what's on your wall, or just take some breaths, or feel your feet on the floor, anything like that. Yeah, it's amazing how powerful that can be, just to get, back into the body like that.
And I think that's even more important when, as a young child, for instance, or if you've experienced a one-time event where you were unable to escape. Because let's be honest, although our body wants to fight or run, sometimes the only thing we can do is freeze and disassociate. And when we do that, that's our body again keeping us safe. It doesn't want us to be in the moment. So when we're having an anxiety attack, often we get that fuzzy head feeling. We can't concentrate and we've disassociated. So by being able to ground yourself and think about, okay, where am I? I'm safe. Okay, I don't like being here at the moment. Am I able to leave? So you're bringing yourself back to the moment is very important.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing about that. And also, right, like I often talk about catastrophizing when we talk about anxiety, because I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, especially as it relates to trauma, right? It's like, okay, something bad happened, and now I believe maybe that bad thing is going to happen again, and really getting wrapped up into that kind of thought process. Yeah. Any thoughts with that? Or I guess probably.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the smallest of things, when we're talking about complex, let's go to complex PTSD, for instance. As a child, it may be that you've witnessed domestic violence. So you've been either within the household or within a school environment, that an ordinary discussion isn't just an ordinary discussion. Suddenly, it can escalate from 0 to 10 like that. So it's when you become older and you suddenly hear people having an argument in your mind and your body's hearing that, the message is, oh, hold on, that could escalate straight away. It's not just in your mind. This is what's happened. It's what your body's used to, and it's putting you in alert. Mm-hmm. So I always say it's not actually catastrophizing. It's actually saying, I know what could happen here. And that's when we're able to check in and say, yes, okay, that's what happened then. But actually, they're actually having an ordinary argument and they're not the same people.
Right.
And so we're able to do that with our grounding techniques. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm a big believer that once we're able to acknowledge that and ask ourselves those questions and be aware, that we're able then to learn to use the tools that we have.
Right. Yeah, because without being grounded, it's hard to even reach for your tool belt, right? If you're not,
absolutely
settle down. Yeah.
Yeah. And some, for instance, I do a workshop just on self-care, and that will be even for clients that have worked with me before, because we all need to touch base again, and yourself, me, we have to look after our self-care, but there will be times when we need to check in with other people, to ensure that we're doing the best for ourselves that's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I love that. I'm curious too, because you also focus on helping people with chronic fatigue. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that shows up as it relates to people having experienced trauma?
Absolutely. So again, you have a physical. So chronic fatigue is a physical reaction, and we're seeing more and more understanding about it in the biomedical world. But also when you look at it, the fatigue comes from our adrenals and our thyroids, and they become overworked. And it's keeping you, again, often it's like, what's happening underneath? It's because you become so tired. You have, some people have actually fought every day to get out of bed, to go to, say, school. Can you imagine, as an adult, it's hard enough to think about walking into a work environment when you're under extreme pressure, when you're stressed, when you're going through a divorce, lots of different life events that are hard. So when we're exacerbating that with our childhood as well, our body becomes overloaded. And that's when it just shuts off. It says no more. And you can be bedbound, and we've seen lots of different information about people that have been diagnosed with chronic fatigue, ME, fibromyalgia also includes pain in the body. And the messages a lot of the clients are given is there is no recovery from that. And actually, that's not true. And if you tell that to anybody, that is awful. That's like saying that if you've had a heart attack, there is no recovery from this, because that's not true either. What it's saying is your life will change, because we need to learn to change and listen to what we've been doing and maybe slow down and accept ourselves. But then look underneath, that's when we start doing the work with the trauma. So we're looking at our relationship with ourselves, which is often the hardest thing. We look at our relationship with everybody else, and we look after everybody else, but it's the relearning. So when I'm working with clients, for instance, that are bedbound and seriously ill, those steps become even smaller. So we don't work with each other on an hourly basis. It may only be 15 minutes, but it's when you're in bed, what is it? What's the one thing you can do for yourself that makes you feel loved and nurtured? So is it cleaning your teeth? Is it washing your face? And it starts that small. And I do get some people that can be quite angry at times and say that sounds too simplistic for something that is, I've been diagnosed with this. I've been told that I'm never going to get out of a wheelchair. I'm always in a wheelchair. And actually, again, there is no evidence to suggest that you can never get out of that wheelchair. Mm-hmm. But there is plenty of evidence to show you how our bodies, physically and psychologically work together to try and keep us safe. And we just need to look at the messaging that, as I said right at the beginning, the messages that are going from our vagus nerve in our stomach up to our amygdala in our brain.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing specifically as it relates to chronic fatigue, because I know that's something that so many people and potentially watching right now are struggling with as it relates to trauma. So
and it's very debilitating. Sorry, I need to put my teeth in there. When you are a person that's so used to getting up and doing something and you can't even get out of bed, it is physical. So I'm not undermining anything there. And I want anyone listening to be really clear on that. It is physical. Mm-hmm. And so a bit like when I said it's not just in your head. It really isn't.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you for acknowledging that. And thank you for everything you've shared. Let's talk a little bit about how people can learn more about you. I know you have a free booklet for everyone, and everyone, you can click on the link below to go grab that. Can you share what that is?
Yes, certainly. It's just, I say just, there's I'm very big on language and I shouldn't say just, but it's about the first few steps about self-care. The importance of having a toolbox. I have a toolbox, and that's a physical toolbox as well as a mental toolbox. So I like to share that with everybody. So that's important as a stepping stone, and not even, yes, for yourself, but even if you want to gift it on to somebody else as well, because I'm a big believer in paying forward and raising awareness, because we don't know what we don't know. A lot of this information is on my website, and I say that because I'm very much in the doing. So I don't always update my social media, and it's not because I don't care, and it's not because I'm lazy, it's because I'm also very aware of my own self-care as well. So I balance it. So there is information there. And if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to contact me through the website. And I do offer 30-minute calls that are free, so that I can speak one-to-one with people, and we can email.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing about all that. And again, everyone, the link to all of that is below. You can go check out your free gift as well as the other resources. Do you have any last insights before we wrap up?
Yes, there's a question I'm going to ask you that I ask everybody, and it's something for your listeners to think about. And it's, what one thing do you do for yourself every day that makes you feel loved and nurtured?
I love it.
So whilst you're thinking about what you do, I'm going to share what I do. So I'm giving you some time to think about it. Mine is cleaning my teeth. Because for me as a child, before I went into care, that wasn't an important part. It wasn't taught to me by my parents. When I went into a children's home at the age of 4, it's assumed you already know how to do that. And I didn't. And often, if you didn't clean your teeth, your toothpaste would be left on your toothbrush until it went hard and horrible. And then you reluctantly had to clean your teeth with it. And so for me, I've had lots of trouble with my gums, which again is another physical example of what happens after trauma, because trauma plays a big part in our teeth. So now for me to be able to brush my teeth morning, in the evening, and there are occasions, I'll do it during the day, or even if I'm feeling very low and I've got mouth ulcers, not now, but when I used to, I love nothing more than cleaning my teeth because of the feeling it gives me in my heart. It makes me feel loved and nurtured because I'm nurturing myself, and I use an aloe vera toothpaste now. So that's why I'm talking about simple. It doesn't have to be anything big, but I'm very mindful when I'm doing it.
I love
so
that.
Andy, thinking about yourself, what one thing do you do for yourself every day that makes you feel loved and nurtured?
I always get some kind of exercise, and I love moving. And that's something that's just if I don't move, I feel like not okay. So
Yeah.
I do something, whether it's going on the elliptical or going out for a walk in the state park or at the beach or something like that. Something that gets my heart rate up and gets me moving. And that would be my thing that I do every day.
Lovely. And as we know, that's releasing serotonin into your brain, which is a great way of shutting off the adrenaline. So again, there you go. It's another physical aspect of recovery. And that's why I speak about the physical so much. And for anybody that's chronically fatigued, movement is important. When we say movement, I encourage my clients to make steps. So even if they've been unable to get out of bed for quite a while, are they able to sit up? Are they able to move to a chair? And I've had one lady that when she was able to move from her bed and go and sit in the garden, that was amazing for her. And that was her movement.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. What a great
My pleasure.
last thing to look inward and figure out for yourself. So I appreciate you sharing that question. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you, Avaya students who are watching or listening, for showing up for yourself today. It just says so much about you that you're here and you're willing to take a look at this topic today. And we will see you all again very soon. Take care. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this latest class with Beverly Ann. She talked with us today about PTSD. It's not just in the head. We talked about many different impacts of trauma, being obviously emotional impacts and physical impacts on our bodies, and all those different things that trauma unresolved can manifest into. We talked about chronic pain, chronic fatigue, IBS, migraines, things like that. And I just wanted to make a quick note about one of the things she talked about being that PTSD, right, post-traumatic stress disorder. She talked about it not being a disorder. She doesn't like to look at it as disorder. And I love that because, right, it truly is our body's reaction to something happening, a reaction that was designed to keep us alive and to keep our bodies safe, and succeeded in keeping our bodies safe and alive, right? So I think it's important to remember that in your journey, and just remember to be compassionate for how your body works the way it does to keep you safe. And obviously there are all these many things we can do to heal that reaction and to ground ourselves and to calm our nervous systems, but just being grateful for our bodies working the ways that they do to keep us safe. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Take care.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.